who here is from a non-profit organization? Hands up. NPO. Almost everybody. Who is here from the private sector? GLCs, PLCs, MNCs? Okay, quite a few. Who is from government? No one? Okay. Oh, one. Okay. Okay. So we have a mixed crowd, actually mostly NPOs. Naturally so, because I think this is we're gathering a lot of non-profit organizations and also NGOs. Morning, everyone. So we are talking about building a better future together. Corporates empowering change makers. I am Zaim, and I am the co-founder of Nation Building School and Malaysia Jobs Coalition. Quick introduction is I focus mainly on employment and employability in terms of providing decent access to decent work for all Malaysians, and my mission is to eliminate unemployment, which is a separate conversation altogether. Now, let me start by, well, maybe what I'll do is to do justice to three of you, and this is maybe introduction for each speaker and what you do. With relation to the topic of working with civil society and the non-profit / social sector, maybe introduce yourself, your organization, and in your line of work, how are you engaging and collaborating with non-profit organizations, since many of them are here, and how has that journey been? So we can go through each speaker, and then we'll jump back for a question and answer. I think this is a format I think might work. We'll start with Puan Anita Ahmad. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Zaim. Assalamualaikum and good morning to everybody. It's good to be here, and I've been doing this work for 8 years, and I still am discovering new organizations, so that's good. I thought I've met all of them. So this is a good platform to get to know more of you. So I'm Anita Ahmad. I lead the work on community development and humanitarian disaster in Yayasan Hasanah. Yayasan Hasanah is a foundation of Khazanah. We were established in 2015 and working from the earlier corporate responsibility work that Khazanah did. So we've continued this, but with an independent entity through an endowment fund that was provided by Khazanah. So we're primarily a grant-making organization, but that's not all we do. We also look to support the ecosystem of non-profit organizations as well as social enterprise. We do advocacy work, and I think quite a lot of things that we do is also trying to connect the dots and not see how different organizations can work together. How do we strengthen partnerships as well between the private sector, government, as well as non-profit organizations? So we do a lot of collaborations as well. But primarily in our focus area, we do education, community development, environment, as well as arts, heritage, and culture. And within this, we have very specific focus. So quite a lot of people think that when they hear these 4 terms that we do everything, no, we don't. I always say that foundations don't have an infinite source of resource, so we are very focused on what we do. For example, under community development, we are very much focused on income generation projects and programs, as well as community leadership. Apart from that, and underlying that, we do have what we call our enablers to push forward all of our focus areas. And our enablers is like we have quite a stringent monitoring and evaluation system. I think for us that's very important because we call ourselves an impact-driven organization, and we want to really be able to see that we're impactful. And I think that's quite important in terms of how we see things. We're not an output-based organization. We are at minimum outcome, but we're looking at impact. But that takes a bit of a journey. Secondly, we also, like I said, do a lot of capacity building within the organization as well as to our ecosystem. So we do a lot of things like roundtables, training. Even under our Yayasan Khazanah sister entity, we provide scholarships for those in the sector to be able to become more professionals. Because just a bit of background myself, I've been in this sector for 20 years. I consider myself a professional. People think I'm a volunteer. No, I was a volunteer for 3 weeks when I first joined Mercy Malaysia, and then I became their first paid staff because I believe that the work that I do is of value. It's not just about volunteering my time, because if you expect me to change the world, then surely I also need to be a professional to change the world, right? So, and with Mercy Malaysia, then I was also part of the UN, so I had some experience there, and now at the funding side. So been in this space for 20 years, looking at different perspectives. So maybe I'll just pass it on. Thank you.
And thanks so much, Anita, for that presentation. I think you mentioned many, many interesting points, but one of the things I really want to pick on is capacity building among NGOs, NPOs, and CISOs. I think this is necessary because a lot of us want to do good, but how? How to get money? How to measure impact? How to work with the right community? And then secondly, you mentioned about this is a misconception among our space. Many of us here can relate. That people always say they will volunteer. Have you, hands up if anyone thought that the work you do is voluntary? Ada kan orang cakap, oh kau ni volunteer ke atau kau kerja dia sebagai professional? People always make the misconception that kerja di non-profit is volunteer. When in fact, we ada gaji, we ada SOCSO, we ada EPF, right? This is a major, major misconception among NGOs and NPOs, and I think this is a injustice. I think Wahoo pun dah geleng-geleng kepala, dia setuju. Nanti kita akan go to Wahoo, but we're going to go to Miss Prema from Taylor's. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Sam. So I'm Prema. Good morning, everyone. Really nice to be here, and just the vibrancy of all the organizations here today as well is very motivating. So I come from Taylor's University. We're one of the oldest universities in Malaysia, and of course very education-centric, right? So that is our core. But through this education, for many years, we brought in NGOs, we have CSR programs. Of course, we also have service learning, which is part of the curriculum, where we bring in and expose students to societal issues and create awareness. We do a lot of projects with NGOs and government organizations as well. Last year, we actually had a whole strategic shift in the university towards purpose-led learning. So with purpose-led learning, we established 13 impact labs. And through these impact labs, which are based on the foundations of the UN SDGs and the ESGs, was to really get our students, because as a university, we want to provide that platform for students to understand what is happening outside campus walls and in a multidisciplinary way. So although we are entrenched in education, we are also, through the faculties, we have the specialists really in engineering, in business, all the experts, the professors are there. So we have the knowledge, we have the know-how. So it's really just taking this out now to community and helping solve sort of real-world issues and exposing the students in that way. So that is really my role now, looking at the Impact Lab for Education for All, which is one of the Impact Labs, where we engage heavily on the different stakeholders, focusing on the vulnerable communities in the different areas. It could be in learning disabilities, it could be minority groups, it could be indigenous groups, it could be anybody who is a vulnerable community. One of the biggest projects is really being in education is learning poverty. So learning poverty is a very big issue in Malaysia. And that's one of the main things that we are tackling as well. So in the Impact Labs, covering all the areas of business, engineering, medicine, we also, the three main pillars that we look at is education. So how what our students learn is tied in. The second one is advocacy, to create awareness of things that are happening. Even for minority groups, sometimes we tend to go for the bigger communities where there are bigger issues, but the smaller ones get less visibility. So creating that awareness, and of course being a university, research. So with NGOs and all, I know we do a lot of work and a lot of data, a lot of things are collected, but it's not reflected anywhere. So that's where the university can come in for comprehensive reports on leading to these areas. So that's really about me and the work we're doing related to today's Kind Malaysia.
Thanks so much. Prema, just before I pass to Wahoo, there was a slide just now on your particular impact lab. And the word that I saw that was a bit captivating was educational liberation.
Yeah.
Enlighten us. What is this? Maybe speak more about the lab and maybe any examples that you do under that particular. Because there's 13
Yep.
labs, right? And
Yeah,
you're
the
one of the
13.
13.
So I'm the deputy director of that one. Maybe we go back to that slide. So that's really our vision and mission for the slide with Dr. Logan. We support vulnerable individuals and communities in need to attain educational liberation. So it's really breaking away the chains and to liberate people educationally. So some of the projects, I must share with you one of our success stories, I suppose, which we've done, which we stumbled upon during the pandemic, was Project Baca Baca. So Project Baca Baca is also because a lot of the vulnerable communities, a lot of these kids don't have even handphone. You know, they have one handphone in the family and everybody shares it. They have to wait for the parents to come home before they can do homework. You know, and we're not even talking like people outside KL. This is within Klang Valley. In Bangsa areas, in Subang areas, in Lembah Sumbang, Lembah Pantai, and all of that. And so what we did was we got volunteers, our students. I mean, that's one of the strengths that we have as a university. We have the manpower because we have the students, right, to run these projects. And so what we did was we just had, we did reading material for these children. And as I was saying, learning poverty. So these are literacy. So we only have about 80% in Malaysia that children who are, let's say, 10 years old are reading at age level, at 10 years old, right? So there's about 30% of children who are reading, who cannot even read, maybe in standard 1, standard 2, standard 3. So they are already starting off on a bad foot, right? And now we're talking about AI and all these things. So that gap is getting even bigger. They have no clue what's happening. Right? So what we did was we actually gave them reading material. We photocopied simple reading material and we got volunteers to call them up 1 hour once a week. And just read with them, help them pronounce, explain to them. That's all it was. Yeah. And after 1 year, so we do it in 10-week cycles because, you know, school calendar, our calendar and all of that. And there was 93% attendance rate. Because a lot of the parents saying, oh, online teaching, my child doesn't know what the teacher is talking about, right? And they have to do on their own, and these parents also cannot really help them much. And by the end of it, we saw 89% improvement in Bahasa reading and 100% improvement in English reading performance of these students after 1 year. And we just got note in February, one of the children as well got the pelajar terbaik in his school. So his parents sent us the photo and the son. So it is really, I mean, these are the things that we do. So this project, Baca Baca, is really very heavy in volunteerism. So this is what we call education liberation. We're really just putting them back on track, right? Through these sort of projects. So we have Project Baca Baca, we have also design literacy, media literacy, workshops where we do with school children, visual literacy, and also we are part of the Project Baca Baca is our School of Computing is actually developing an app, the Taylor's Reading app, where this material, and we're getting students to record it as well. And so when the children listen to it, they already know. So that cuts down on our volunteers and the organizing of it. So that's really the liberation. We want to pull, anybody can be deprived. You may be deprived, I may be deprived in some form of educational aspect. So it's really touching all of that.
Thank you so much, Prema, for sharing. And I think you touched on something important. I think a lot of times when we are in urban areas or developed areas, we tend to neglect communities that are actually in need. Urban people are suffering. They bear the brunt of rising cost of living and even the pandemic. And I think the recent PISA scores, the science, our performance in science have shown that actually we are easily 3 years behind. So the student in Singapore at 15 years old, 15 year old Singaporean student, Malaysian is probably the same age. If there is a 15-year-old Malaysian and Singaporean, Malaysian education level is 12 years to 3 years behind Singaporeans. And I think that's worrying when you look at the PISA scores, math scores. And then, so not to mention, we're talking about language literacy, but STEM is in crisis now. I think a lot of students don't want to do science and maths. I pun tak nak dulu, I takut. But this is one of the issues that I think we're facing in the education system. People talk about the education crisis, health crisis, education crisis, financial crisis, fiscal crisis. I don't know what's not in crisis, but maybe we will touch that later on. Issue panas. We'll go to Wahu, and Wahu, I think feel free to also build on any of the points mentioned in terms of challenges. But I'll pass the floor to you, Wahu.
Morning, everyone. My name is Wahu. So I run NGO Hub. It doesn't feel like it, but I've also been in the sector for 10 years. Before that, I was in corporate. I have about 9 years of corporate experience. But the origin of this idea is basically that when we look at the sector, right, look at NGOs and even nowadays social enterprise, right? There is not really a strong support system that's available. I think you mentioned in the beginning, we need capacity building, right? The thing is, a lot of NGOs and non-profit organizations, they are started by people who are more of social activists. So these are people who, when they notice a problem in the community, right, kind of like a social issue in the community, and they wanted to solve it. So they created a solution, or they are involved with that work of trying to solve that issue. And eventually they find that they have to build an organization around it to be more effective and for the impact to be a bit bigger. And then they get trapped in this environment where I have to run an organization now, but I don't have the organization skill. I didn't start with the idea of, I want to build an organization with 50 people and make this kind of revenue and impact and all that. They didn't start that way. So, and with running an NGO, right, we did a survey a couple of years ago, about 60%, more than 60% of NGOs are run by a team of 10 people or less. So most NGOs in Malaysia are run by a small team. And there are more than 80,000 registered NGOs in Malaysia, all different types. It's like, the number is crazy, right? So there are a lot of NGOs out there. A lot of it are run by very small teams. And for them to be able to make the impact that they want to, we noticed that there's not enough of support for them in terms of their operational skills and management skills and all that, which is actually not their core strength, right? I mean, they are great at solving social issues. So that's why we want to create a platform that is a resource platform. So we do a lot of capacity building. So NGO Hub is basically a resource platform where we try our best to have programs and services that helps other NGOs. So we do focus on two things basically. One is capacity building, and the other one is as a collaboration hub. If you may move to the next slide. The way we think about it, right, is that one is that, of course, NGOs need the capacity building, right? They need basic management skills. But the other one is that it's also actually a very interesting problem we have within the sector, which is that all of us are working on similar issues, right? Like you will never find an issue like poverty or homelessness or education problem that is worked by only one NGO. Right? It's usually multiple parties, multiple NGOs, multiple groups, different government agencies are involved. But it's actually very difficult for all these different parties and stakeholders to come together and collaborate in the most effective way. Right? So we have tried many different things in the past to try and bring different parties together, right, informally, and we find that what is lacking is actually basically sometimes it's a framework. Right? It's like, okay, are there better ways to just put people together to work together? Because when you put people together, right, what's interesting that happens is that they bring their own experience, their own biases, their own egos into the picture, and you spend a lot of time managing personalities. Right? So that's an interesting. So unless you come up with a framework to facilitate this process, you will see that actually collaboration among NGOs to work on a specific issue, let's say, okay, we want to tackle the homeless problem, it's very difficult. So what we do is we are trying to use something called network science. Actually, it's a very well-researched methodology. We're trying to bring it in. We do some either workshop or exercises that helps different NGOs or entities come together and they can work together. You know, they build trust. They work in a certain way that is collaborative. So that's one thing we are trying out here, and you know, we have done a couple of interesting things about building coalition and all that. So that's basically what we want to focus on in NGO Hub, and that's what has been our core focus for the past couple of years, to bring different stakeholders together. So I have this other platform that I'm running, which is Giving Hub, very, very quickly. You know, I used to work for a foundation, but now I run these two organizations together. If you can put on the next slide, sorry. So this is actually another platform that we created to facilitate the act of giving, right? So it's called Giving Hub. Basically, we help corporate companies give to the community or to NGOs through projects, through very specific programs. We also provide a platform for charities to fundraise in a crowdfunding online method. So that's how we want to look at giving in this sense. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Wahu. I really enjoy your sharing. I want to invite you to give an example of a systems issue, if you can share with the audience, because you mentioned about systems practice, and I think a lot of challenges that we see today are systemic, and usually MPOs don't think about system, we think about program. So maybe you can give us an example of some of the work that you've done in terms of systems practices.
Yeah, I think in our work in trying to support other NGOs in creating impact, right? For example, you know, a couple of years ago, we worked very closely with a lot of soup kitchens. What we noticed is that the issue itself is very complex. So if you take any issues that any NGO is trying to work on, right, either environment or animal rights and homelessness, for example, these are complex issues that does not have one solution. It's not a technical solution that you introduce and, okay, problem solved, you know, you don't have to look at it ever again. It's an evolving problem, and there's so many moving parts that not one organization or one party can solve it completely. So you need multiple stakeholders to come in, right? The government agencies have come in, government ministries have come in, different NGOs has different services has to come in. They have to look at the whole things holistically and look at the change that you can make over time. So if you approach a problem with a program mindset, you are saying, I introduce a program, I created a program to solve this problem, and the beginning, at the end, I achieve this percentage of improvement, right? But what you wouldn't know is that while you are trying to do that program and implementing that, right, does it create some other side effect? Or does it impact other part of the system that create some negative factor as well? So the system practice method is basically a method to just help gain some clarity. It's not a solution in itself. It's an attempt to use certain methodology and mapping exercises to understand the problem better, how everything is linked, right? So you start noticing that, oh, actually when I see this problem of homelessness, right, it's because of their financial problems. Economic issues is one, family relationship is another one. How does it link back to here? Then addiction problem is another one. Then housing and affordability is another one. So how does all this link together and how does it affect different things? The economic situation at that current moment is also another one. So actually system practice is about looking at a complex problem and trying to just gain a little bit of understanding and try and see, if I do a program, right, how would it affect the whole system? Does it eventually benefit, you know, do we move to a better outcome in total, or does it not? Because I can also say that there's a lot of activities that we do, a lot of programs that we do it for years and years and years, and somehow it's like, it's the same.
Still there.
Right?
The issue is still there.
Yeah, so that's the approach we want to try and introduce and talk about more.
I wanna promote Wahu and to say that I think if NGOs are looking to look at systems practices, go talk to Wahu, because I also learn from Wahu. Because as a lot of NGOs and MPOs, you know, right, kita buat banyak gila program, right? Banyak. Every month ada program. Tapi masalah tu still sana, kan? The problem is still there. It doesn't change every year. Notice or not, kan? We do, soup kitchen is a good example. Because I also volunteer with Kachara Soup Kitchen. For every Saturday night, We go to the Padang, we go to Bukit Bintang, we go to Chowkit, we give food. But the homeless issue actually is growing. I remember 2014-15, you doubled, right? Because the problem is, we're not looking from a system perspective, we're looking from a program perspective. Operational lah, kan? Oh, we do this, thinking that we can help more beneficiaries. Padahal, the systemic issue is not something that we have addressed. And I think it needs a multi-stakeholder lah, kan? Government, corporates, and also civil society lah. Three multi-sectoral focus. So systemic actually is very important because sometimes we don't look at this. And also sometimes kita NGO, tak pandai benda ni. But Wahu, I think, you mentioned an interesting point. I want to go back to the panels and ask maybe more specific to your work, and maybe start with Ponita back. Running, co-leading Yayasan Hasanah under the community development pillar, and dealing with a lot of non-profits, NGOs. What is something that you've noticed is a major problem for you when you work with non-profits? What has been, or can be two, or maximum three, right? Because we want to deep dive in terms of when you see them, you think in the back of your mind, alah, kan, apa tu, apa masalah tu? If you can share with us, that would be something I think a lot of here can appreciate lah.
One, eh?
After you. It can be
Yeah.
three maximum.
Okay, let's start with the positive. I mean, of course, like I said, I've been in this sector for 20 years, but everybody starts with a good heart. But I think leading with what Wahu was saying is that I think a good heart doesn't create change. So certainly the capacity building of the organization is important. You do need to invest in that. But more than that, I think I find, okay, I'll be very candid. I find that there are too many, and when you talk about personalities, right, there are too many egos at play. And the ego and part of it is also this privilege of thinking, well, I'm helping others. It's not, so I don't like to use the word helping actually. I think it's supporting, enabling. These are the words that we want to use when we work with others as well. So once you lower that, then I think you can see the real reason why you're here. It's not about making yourself feel good. So that's something that I always talk to my partners. No matter what I say, I'm not doing this for us, I'm doing it for the ones that we're trying to support. So once you clear all that and your compass is to your participants, then I think somehow it starts being more clear, and then you work more in partnerships. So when you're driven by ego, then you don't work in partnerships. That's number one. Number two as well, there's just too many organizations. How many did you say? 80,000. And because I keep meeting people saying that, I'll give you an example. A very good person doing great stuff in his organization and then decides to leave the organization to do exactly the same thing. I don't understand why you do this. What is it that, that you cannot overcome and just grow and support this organization? So I think we need to think about that in all honesty, because, and I see this as a grant-making organization, right? So of course many come to say like, oh, but Anita, how come you're not giving us a grant? I said, you are in a very highly competitive environment. There are so many organizations asking for this, the small pie that different foundations have. What makes you better than others? And what makes you better than others, once you put your ego aside, saying I'm so great, is what impact are you actually making for your participants or your beneficiaries? I don't even like to use the word beneficiaries. I'm actually moving away because beneficiaries, again, is that whole language, right? We've got to put that aside. And what is it that we're really trying to do? And you're absolutely right, a lot of times it's programmatic. So, you're really not thinking what really benefits the person. You're just thinking about how can I help the person? And it's what I want to say, stop thinking about what you can do, but be more participatory. So one of the things that we don't practice in this country is participatory approach. So yesterday, quite interestingly, we need to talk more about this. What we've been trying to do in Hasanah is, we are very, in doing our community development work, we don't work in just every community. So we are very clear that we want to work in place-based community development because we work in many areas, but one of them, say for example, is a PPR. So we know the problems of urban poverty, and in PPRs, there are thousands of people. And going back to what Wahu said, why are we not working together to solve an issue? What is the problem here? It's a tough one, right? Because, of course, issues are complex. But what we have done in the last 5 years is actually we've been able to actually work with 7 non-profit organizations and social enterprise, and reached 853 people in one location. But you know what? 853 is meaningless when the location has 15,000 people. And to bring everybody in that room is not easy. So we did it once, and we kind of didn't do it, but we're trying to bring that together again. And then we talked about, how can we work together? But you're absolutely right, Wahoo, we need a framework. And we have developed some frameworks that we are using, that we working with government companies. We actually were able to mobilize, let me remember the statistics, hold on, because I'm really bad with numbers. I think we were able to mobilize 161 million among GLCs to contribute during the COVID pandemic. Wow. And that was with some, with collaboration, that we knew collectively that we were creating an impact. And we assisted 80,000 people through that in different forms. So how do we reach that in a PPR location? Then we can go back to what you're talking about, like how are we actually creating change? Because, we can glorify change makers, but I always challenge, are you really making change or not? There's a lot of glorification, change makers, change, this is a grand word, but ask yourself, are you really making change? So for me, it's very simple. I ask, and I ask myself this because it's not an easy answer. I said, okay, we're working in B40. Are we really taking the B40 out of the B40? Right. Or, so when we do a lot of our programs, once we put aside and we look at the programs, we say, okay, is increasing income by 500, 600 enough? It's not. It doesn't take them out of the B40, right? But that doesn't mean that also when you increase the income, that improves their well-being as well. So a lot of, so we are really known to be very tedious in terms of application, but that's what we're trying to ask you to do. Are you really creating change or not? Put aside whatever you feel about yourself. It's not about you. Go back to what is it that you're trying to do and think about, is your program impactful? But it does go back to that whole resource thing. So when you're doing this, is it about you, about yourself? Because the other thing that I find is that, so of course a lot of NGOs say that, oh, I'm so busy now. I'm also busy. I'm very busy. You should see my schedule. It's ridiculous. But I'm still doing an online course for 6 weeks. Because I continuously want to learn. So throughout my career as well, in 20 years, I've done my master's because I was lost after I worked in Malaysia. I got the Shivering Scholarship because I was thinking I'm not doing enough. I don't think I'm on the right track. I don't know what I was doing half the time, apart from risking my life. So I did my master's. After that, I still was, after a few years, despite all my skills, then I went for a fellowship. And now I'm doing an Oxford University program. So it's also, again, going back to yourself, right? Are you really supporting the person? Are you doing enough? Because one of the things then, you have to build your own capacity. Don't wait for others to do it for you. Busy or not busy, again, what is your true intention? What is your north that needs you to do what you do? Because if not, you're going to become, I have been burnt out, I have been jaded, I've been, I've gone through the whole thing, gone for therapy because my work is hard. But again, if you go back to what it is that you're doing, so that's what I feel that, I think in Malaysia, there's too much, that's why I go to that whole self, why are you doing this, right? That's of course one other thing that I can say. And then quickly to that as well, leading to that whole looking at yourself, is stop blaming others for the problem. So it still goes back to that. Look for solutions and stop saying, oh, it's the government's fault, it's company's fault. It's everybody's fault but your own, is it? So again, that's why I go for these kind of things because and I network and I listen because you need to constantly learn. It is a difficult sector that we are in and it's evolving. So keep up with the times and do your networking and understand and always come with that mind frame of not it's a problem but how can I solve this? So every time somebody says, no, even like one of the PPRs that we're working in said, Anita, why are you going there? It's so difficult. I'm like it's susah lagi nak buat lah. And I've proven that in that PPR, I've reached out to 873 people. It can be done. Why you tell me it's a problem? Is that where we're supposed to be, right? But it goes back to that personal thing of I'm quite determined, and then but you also have to lead other people as well to do that. And part of that is also constantly, it's good that you're here listening to us because that's part of your capacity building. And then of course people say, oh, it's expensive. I said, no, it's up to you actually. You can, I'll be very also upfront. I was shocked that I got the Shivering Scholarship because honestly, I got grade 2 in SPM. By some miracle, through determination, through my work and through a lot of support as well, I eventually got that. So another bit of going to yourself is also believing in yourself as well. We get very beaten down working in NGOs because there's a lot of toxicity amongst us actually, and it's hard work that we do. But that's why you need to expose yourself. You need to just drive through that, get the support that you need, keep learning, and then you start seeing miracles happen. And I've seen that, and you have to believe in that because stop saying that it doesn't change. You start, you start with yourself, and it may be some difficulties because when you don't reflect as well, then you don't see the changes. But I can see that there are some. Of course, some it's qualitative, some you can quantify. And if you want to feel really good, do the quantification. And that's why I can quote numbers. Because when organizations don't measure, and that's when you think like, oh my God, things haven't changed. Actually, they have. But you never even sat down for a moment, even yourself, to think about it. So that's what we do as well. So we're a tough foundation because, like even yesterday, we were saying like, no, it's an amazing social enterprise. And you're like, yeah, we're not sure about applying to you because your reporting is so hard. But it's because of reporting, I can tell you how many people we've reached. That's why I can say we've reached like 2.2 million people. Under that, I have data to say like we've increased percentage by how many percent. And that's when I don't get burnt out because I'm like, oh, I have the numbers to say that I am on the right track. That's what, so people know Hasana is not an easy organization to work with. When people ask that, how you tahan 8 years? This is how. That's number one. Number two is also we make sure that we go on field trips. So you need all this to also gain to yourself. And that's how, and be open to collaboration, to partnerships, to capacity building, to having a conversation with each other. And then you will see things actually, there's the brighter future. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing. So much wisdom there. So much wisdom. I like the fact that you mentioned capacity lah, kan? Like what Wahoo mentioned, kan? There are so many issues, and kalau kita buat benda yang sama setiap kali, memang benda tak akan berubah lah, right? Because I also learned this the hard way. I run an NGO. We do many programs. Sometimes short sendiri, kan? We do a lot of programs every year, but the issue is still there. And to your point, sometimes you need to learn new things and learn new frameworks. And actually, kan, one thing that I realize about the space is tak ramai orang kat sini apply untuk fellowship ataupun program yang free. Okay, actually a lot of programs in Malaysia, a lot of companies and foundations and international organizations offer fellowship to go to US, to go to UK, to go to Europe, to go to India, to go everywhere, and free, FOC, cuma kena apply. Tapi apply tu kena pandai lah. Okay, there's a way of applying lah. Maybe boleh tanya Puan Anita, she's very good at applying. So I think this is one of the things we need to do more, because I'll be honest, Wahoo and I can say a lot of the fellowships that we see, balik-balik muka sama je. Orang yang sama je actually. Sometimes when you look at the fellowship, that guy has been to like 5 different fellowships, kan? Because this person, or they know how to, they know the opportunities. And actually kan, okay lah, the other one is where to get opportunities. Itu pun excuse. Okay, macam I go to this thing called opportunitydesk.com, berlambak sana kan, a lot of opportunities for us to apply. And once we go through the process, we become better lah. We become more sharper as a leader lah. And you mentioned also the other point I want to mention, the silo, working in silos. I think maybe we can look at consolidating NPOs, NGOs kan, merger. Kalau that's difficult, coalition, gabungan. Malaysia tak cukup gabungan guys, memang tak cukup. Tengok belakang nama I pun gabungan kan, because I realised that one NGO cannot do it alone. Memang tak boleh. And sometimes if it's a systemic issue, a lot of NGOs, whether it's in welfare, women, orang asli, climate, kan, need to have gabungan. You need to have gabungan, you need to have a coalition. Because if you don't have coalition, sometimes susah lah kan. Menteri nak jumpa pun, you seorang je. Kan? Tapi kalau ada gabungan, 20-30 NGO, the impact is there. And you might be able to do a lot more as a coalition. I want to jump to Prema, and I want to ask you, not the same question, but like in tailors, when you deal with students that are interested in this impact labs, what are the challenges that you face? What are the challenges that students tell you about this project that they are involved in? And I want to be more specific in terms of, do these students just volunteer, or do some of them eventually want to become, founders or join non-profit organizations? You don't have to answer if you don't know the answer, but I just want to know in terms of, first, what do the challenges that you face in your implementation, and what are sort of the long-term impact of the impact labs for students?
Okay, so The overall challenge, first of all, I'll address that first, is because, you know, a lot of companies, the buzzword is sustainability, you know, people like all this impact, right? All these words, right? So, but in an actual, how does it fit in the whole ecosystem? Not just setting up a CSR department in an organization. It is, I mean, yes, you create that support for the communities or individuals, but there is no ecology for the whole thing to really strive, right? So that is one of the challenges. So that means from the time a student comes in, what is their purpose? What drives them? You know, the learning and all set aside. But what are they going to apply into towards community, right? So that is one of the challenges. So how the whole ecosystem works towards purpose-led education in that sense, right? Not just having little projects, they meet people for one semester and that's it. So the sustainability of projects as well, how do we manage that, all right? Because we work on a semester system, as I said, with some modules. So we can't just have, so yes, you create impact in the participants, in the communities that you impact for that 10 weeks, right? And as clearly pointed out by you, by Wahu, and by Anita as well, is that even for literacy, all of us gone in this hall, literacy will still be an issue, right, for decades to come. They haven't been solved. So how do we have sustained programs, and especially with like education and you're educating people and things like that, that needs to have that continuity. So that is that real challenge that we have. So that's why we sort of have programs that are short-term measures, so we sort of touch and go, right? And there are long-term projects and plans that we implement as well. So that is one of the challenges. So students come in and they already know about the impact labs we have during the orientation. We have, to tell them, because you must understand, we are dealing with Gen Z, right? As we were saying, or Zoomers, as we call them, right? So they are very pragmatic. They are very socially conscious. I mean, some of the things they are involved in now, right? The young adults now, 18, 19, 20, 21, they have online businesses. They're actually quite enterprising, right? So they have a lot of strengths that they bring to us, right? That we can leverage on. So a lot of them are the real change makers. They come with ideas. This is what they want to do, really. And so when we share with them about the impact labs, and it's nice because it really breaks away from the faculties, from the borders of the university. So it doesn't mean, you're only a business student, you cannot do anything with the computing students, right? And some universities, even the layout is terrible because it's like really different faculties. You have to drive to to School of Computing or the School of Engineering or the School of the Arts, right? So we are lucky in that way. So it's really breaking borders and bringing in a multidisciplinary approach, which I think what the speakers have been talking about as well. Not one person can solve one problem. You need to see it from different perspectives. And that's the strength that really the students have. So the students are very engaged in it. They enjoy it because it is also embedded in modules. So instead of the final year project would be, developing, let's say the School of Education, developing teaching material for primary school, they are actually doing it in a real world situation. So one of the projects would be like for the refugee school teachers. In refugee schools, I don't know, anybody here from refugee schools? Yes. So in refugee schools, the teacher is basically a person who is just maybe the eldest in the group and knows a bit more than everybody else, right? It could be, of course, volunteers who come in, right? So it is basically, if you are 17 years old and you know how to read, you become the teacher, right? So what we're doing is also equipping them with a whole syllabus to empower these people. So anybody who comes in can take over. The material is there. They know how to do that, right? So one of the hubs that we look at is, besides the literacy, is teacher empowerment. All right? So that is what, so everybody can contribute. So the students love these things because they are actually getting out and they are being immersed in the social in the social issues, in the community. It is not, they say Gen Z's attention span is 8 seconds. That's why we have TikTok and all, right? Just fast, fast, fast. Right? They like...
I look at somewhere else already after 8 seconds. I'm not paying attention. No, I'm kidding. I'm not Gen Z, sorry.
Right? That's what they say. And they're very, they like sharing, right? I always tell sometimes my students, it's like, when I was in university, first day of semester, we get the reading list, we all go to the library and take all the books, right? Because we don't want to share it with anybody. Now, Facebook, oh, you have share button, share, and they're very generous.
Share PDF.
Right? Share PDF, right? So that's the community we are working with. So they have so much passion. They want to do these things. They just need the platforms. They just need the opportunities and the exposure. So I feel that is really our place, And then, but it's also a mix. It's a mixed group. You have some who's like, why am I doing this? I just want to get my degree and go off.
Sure.
Right? So those you cannot change. Yeah. They are there for that purpose. We are there as an institution for that purpose. Right? So balancing everybody's needs is definitely a challenge. But I think once we establish that this is how education is, then we will attract those sort of people as well.
It's so interesting that you mentioned actually a number of misconceptions with young people, right? I think that not all Gen Z want to be in doing impact.
Yeah.
And that's a good point.
Yeah.
But also the other point is not all Gen Z have 8 second attention span. I know like some uncle, pakcik pun after 8 saat main TikTok juga. Ada, right? I mean, I've seen this, right? Some uncles also WhatsApp like gila-gila kan. But you're right, right? To your point that my time when I was in university, 10 years ago, Gen Y, is different than than what we have. Like we would never have Taylor's Impact Lab in our school, because maybe there were more people that are like finish degree then get a job in Goldman Sachs. Not the same, right? Now it's a different era. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to add that. No, I think university programs like these are good, because not everybody who wants to go has to set up an NGO or be in an NGO. Yeah. Because when you talk about the ESGs, and a lot of people have misconception about ESGs or the word on sustainability, it is looking at operating your business in a sustainable manner, which means you need to be conscious of all these issues in a business environment. So I think that maybe we won't see it now. So I think it's great that universities are having this, because we want to put this kind of people who are aware about societal issues and climate change issues into companies, because companies will exist, right, in a capitalist society. But right now, in the capitalist society, it's a very traditional way, because when they came out of Enlightenment, it was all about making money. There was all that whole concept about we are only pleasing the shareholder. But right now, the whole movement towards sustainability and ESG is actually that everything that you do has impact on society and the environment. And the transition is very hard, because you still have this old style thinking. But if more and more universities like this are embedding that, that you do that, because a lot of us are so busy with our studies that we forget about other people. Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see the impact of this kind of university programs in the future. Yeah. May not see it in some of our lifetimes, but I think we need to understand that you don't have to be an NGO to do good. Everything that you do should be doing good, from being nice to one another. When you're doing, even as a HR person, how you're employing people, how do you interview people, being polite and being kind. How do you even work with your own colleagues? It's being kind to each other. How is it that when you want to do a manufacturing business, that you're not destroying the environment, because that's all sustainability as well. And I would like to see people going into industries with that mind frame. So I think we need to think about it in that wider sense, the influence that you have.
Yep.
Before I go to Wahoo, panas guys. Okay, I want to do a temperature check in the audience. Okay, listen carefully. Yeah. If you're feeling 10 meaning best, I'm going to stay on for another half an hour lah kan? 1 hour Okay lah. Another half an hour, I'm going to stay on. It's great. Raise your hands. Okay, guys, good job. Finance bagus. If you're feeling 50-50, I might leave this room, check out the booth, giving up there, or another booth. Give me this if you're feeling 50-50. It's okay, guys. No problem. Oh, tak ada siapa, no one. Wow, okay.
Malaysians are shy lah.
Shy, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't want to be here, tak apa, kena lah. If you're not here, you ciao already kan? Okay, great. So most of the people still want to be here and listen. I think that means we're doing a good job. This panel has got value. Huh? Bahu, pressure on you now. Bahu, no, I don't want to talk about challenges. I want you to, here's my framework for you. 3 points of advice to non-profits when they engage institutions, including like Yayasan Hasanah, when they want to apply for grants or when they want to propose partnerships. Because I think you're an expert in this. What would you say are the 3 top tips for non-profits when they engage people like Puan Anita? When they engage people like, even like Miss Prema, right? When they engage education institutions, when they engage government, what would you say are your top 3 tips for them when they engage, including when they do grants lah?
Okay. I don't know whether I'll pass this test or not, to come up with 3, but, I'll just talk about, what is at the top of my head, right? The most important thing. I think one thing mentioned by Anita just now was that, the continuous learning process. I feel like it's actually a very, very important thing to do. Regardless of what sector you're in, it's still very important. And to link it to something we were just discussing, which is ESG, right? So it's this continuously learning process for us to, for me, the key is for us to speak the same language. Now, again, if you're talking about corporates empowering change makers, right? How to make the connection, right? How do I better connect to corporate companies to give me support, funding, or run programs with me? Sometimes is to be able to understand them, understand what's important to them, and then speak their language. And ESG could be a great tool if you really want to use it, because ESG is basically the linkage between sustainability or the impact of a business, right, to the environment, to the community, to within its organization, the staff and all that. 2, the linkage of all this to their profit. ESG is a language for us to talk about impact work, sustainability, community development in the sense of the P&L of a company, the profit and loss statement, right? Because an ESG program done right links every single thing that you undertake to the profit and loss. And that's the language that companies and the top management wants to speak. The first thing they care about is whether it impacts my expenses and it impacts my profit. If you can use that language to link what you do to that company, you'll be much more successful, I would say. Now, I give the same advice to companies. Actually, part of our work is also trying to influence corporate companies on how to look at work in the community and impact work and social impact, right? I also give the same advice, which is, can you go and speak the language of NGOs or non-profit organizations, right? And that involves doing, spending and investing in community assessment, understanding the problem, some exercises for you to understand the issue, which, I mean, sometimes you don't see corporate companies do, right? So again, there's a lot to be done to be able to speak the other person's language. And again, it's not one way. It's not just you having to speak corporate language. It's for you to also influence them to speak your language, right? What's important on the ground. If you're trying to tackle any issue at all, it's going to be complex, right? If it's not complex, I don't think you will set up an NGO just to do that work. You know what I mean? So if it's complex, it needs time for understanding. And for me, for any kind of program at all to happen, either through partnership with corporate and NGO or government agency, the understanding of it is the first part, right? If you don't gain a good understanding, you won't be able to build any programs. And the thing is, probably in your lifetime, you're not going to be able to build any specific one program that solves an entire issue itself, right? You're trying to make positive change day by day over time, and that's all you can hope for, because these are complex problems. There's no solution to it. There's only chance and opportunity to tweak it and make it better. I don't know whether how many advice is that. Being able to learn something new constantly, being able to evolve constantly. It also means that you constantly you're trying to figure out, hey, does my organization have something still to offer? Right? Do I have to pivot? Do I have to shift to something? Do I have to learn something new? Do I have to offer a new solution, even if I'm tackling the same issue? Again, what that exercise will do is that it will give you a chance to look at what unique things can you offer to the ecosystem. And if you offer a unique thing, more likely corporate companies are willing to work with you because they can't find the solution elsewhere. Right? So those are the few things I can.
I got 3. So seek knowledge. So you need to seek knowledge. This is a point also. Seek knowledge. Because things are changing. We have to change also. Right? But don't check GPT this lah. Huh? Google or go to library. Okay, check seek knowledge. Second is understand what is important to them and speak their language. Good wisdom. And I think he was saying ESG framework. So when we meet corporations and they have no longer a CSR framework but an ESG compliance framework, right? When they do reporting, how do we speak that language and fulfill the criteria? And number 3 is audit your organization. Self-audit your gaps and also what are your strengths. I don't want to say SWOT, no one sounds a bit outdated already, but essentially it's looking at how can you add value to the corporations or institutions. I think that's what your 3 is. Seek knowledge, understand what is important and speak their language, and audit your organization. So the three gems, wisdoms. Rema, you want to add?
Yeah, can I just add as well? What has worked for us in securing grants and financial support and also actually buy-in, right? Because we need volunteers. Sometimes it's not just the money, we need social capital, right? To run these projects because they're very human-centric. It's very labor-intensive, yeah? A lot of these things. What has worked for us, we found, is that if you run these programs or your projects, you also add in success measures to say that you should invest in this because it is proving success. And as what Wahoo was saying, is that it is measured and we are bringing small change. So with this added support financially or with volunteers or in any other, or in knowledge, sometimes the specialists or something, it creates a greater impact. So that's what we found that works as well. If you have statistics, you have data, you have shown that improvement that Anita was saying about as well. It is measured and it is saying this is a worthwhile project to work on in a longer term, in a bigger capacity. That's also one of the sort of language corporations understand, I think.
Porta, you want to add anything to this side chat we're having here? You want to add any points that you've been hearing from Mahu, maybe validate or contradict him?
Yeah, I mean, for me also one of the things I would advise is read the guidelines on what you... No, it's a simple thing, right? But like I said, we've been working at Hasana for 8 years, but I think it is really understanding not all foundations, corporates are the same. So unfortunately, we don't think the same way. We have different priorities, we have different strategies. Our board also drives our priorities and also many other things like our business as well as the current situation also drives our strategy. So it can change over time. So it is resource intensive, but it's worthwhile for you to do some mapping and really understand what is it that you want to fund first, and does it fit into what the organization wants? That's one thing. Another thing is that maintain good donor relations. So this is going beyond, of course, some will say that, all they want is just branding. And so we're not one of those because we're not a business as such. We're part of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. But you do have to maintain donor relations. And this doesn't mean, I'm not asking you to suck up to us, no. but really it's about communicating on a regular basis. So I do tell my partners, I said, look, the report is one thing which is important. So a good, strong report which is accountable with measurements is good. But also in between that as well, it's also updating us. So I always tell them, like, don't just sit in the office, although I don't always do that, but literally, we have board members who are constantly surrounded by corporate issues and all this PNL and all that. And similarly as well, somebody like me also very much administrative and all that. All your updates on a regular basis makes us feel good that we're doing the right thing, that our money is going to the right direction as well. Yeah. So when we get those kind of informal updates, it makes us feel good and we want to help you more. And we feel that you're connecting to us as well. Yeah. So it's not only one way. And by that, you actually build a strong donor relationship. And the third thing is that when you perform well, we want to continue working with you. So, and it's okay if you don't want to work with us. So I always say, like, we're not an easy organization because we look at international benchmarks. Yeah. And because we want Malaysia to be, we want Malaysia to be a developed nation, not developing. Hence, that's why our benchmark is always international. But if you learn with us, go through the journey with us for the first year, and we both we work in partnership, then we will continue this relationship. And that's on both sides, right? So both sides also have to play the game, not play the game, but participate in many multiple ways. So we have continuous partners. But at the same time as well, don't always think that this one organization is going to support you forever. It's not going to happen as well. So you do have to look at multiple funding portfolios. Yeah. You can't just depend on one thing. And I always say that it's good to get grants from corporates, but also do your general fundraising because you need unrestricted funds. So you need to balance it out because with corporations, it is tied to KPIs and their want of reporting, which can tie you down. But a healthy organization will have both because this will deliver on certain programmatic and it's likely to have a larger, we do provide quite large grants, but you need to go also for the small ones and you need to have multiple. It's just as an individual as well, when you invest, right? You need to have multiple things. So whether you like it or not, you do have to invest in resources that will look into that. Yeah.
I like you mentioned the most obvious one is read the guidelines. I agree. I think there's so many times when, especially Yayasan Hasanah has a grant, right? It's actually a grant, yeah. There's a grant by Yayasan Hasanah, and a lot of NGOs come to me like, hey, let's apply for this grant. But then the NGO is a alumni association. Tak boleh lah. I mean, read the guidelines, guys. I mean, like, sometimes benda ni is quite obvious, and sometimes people are like, oh, you got contact ah, you got cable lah. Huh? What cable? Just read the guidelines, kan? Kalau you tak layak, you tak layak. It doesn't matter you the cable ke tak, right? And I think most time cable tu tak jalan, right? Yeah, not Hasanah, exactly. You mentioned also, susah Hasanah ni kan? You mentioned about maintaining donor relations. You mentioned about making sure that doing good work and reporting it because they can pay dividends in the future collaboration. And you also mentioned that diversify your funding and make sure, because bear in mind there are restricted and unrestricted funding. I think that's interesting. There's a maybe point we go to Wahoo. But I want to go to the audience. I don't know if this is possible. I want to ask the audience, I want to open up the floor maybe for some questions. I don't know if maybe I can go down with the mic. Or is there mics? Tak ada mic? No extra mics? Got. Organizer panic. Organizer panic. Ni tak plan. I want to ask the audience for questions. Not so much comment, but questions. If you have any burning questions. Yes, Puan. I turun padang ah.
Mic.
Order.
Mic. Test.
Puan, kalau boleh introduce yourself, your organisation, and then your question.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Hanizan. I am from the organisation called Persatuan Sindrom Down Malaysia, and we have several Persatuan Negeri for Down syndrome all over Malaysia, except for Pahang and Kuala Lumpur. So I'm here to represent for Down syndrome. We are advocating Down syndrome, and which I think some of the corporates and some agencies might not know about Down syndrome. But I think we have developed a lot I've been with this organization for 20 years. So I think we have developed a lot of advocacy to our children with Down syndrome for all ages, the whole Malaysia. And I think, not to say in the international they know about Down syndrome, but in Malaysia, in the rural area, even the parents doesn't know what is the condition of their child and what is the way to move forward. Okay, I have 3 questions. Maybe to Puan Anita Hassana. I think we have applied from the foundation about our project, but unfortunately, I think that was 3 years ago we were declined. Maybe we will try again this year. And we work a lot with the government agencies, especially NGOs with other disabilities, and also with the Kementerian Pendidikan, and also the human resource, because our children are growing, you know. So our intention is to, you call it, kita panggil apa ni, kita kena pergi go to the rural area, kita buat roadshow. This is our intention, the main intention, roadshow, and kita kata kita kena get to the parents, to the bottom, to make them to holistic understand the condition of their child and way to work forward. And if the child come with a medical condition and education condition, they have to look for help. So this is where we run the show, you know, we go to all the states. Now we are focusing on Selangor. So Selangor is a big state, you know, there's a lot of daerah-daerah. So these are the things that we look for funding from corporates, be it maybe NGO Hub also can help us on charity. And we do a lot of fundraising. For the past 20 years, we do a lot of fundraising. But those funding we develop on vocational, pre-vocational, because our children are not accepted in colleges like Giat Mara, College Community, Cheshire Home, you name it lah. Even the Pusat Latihan Perindustrian run by JKM doesn't accept our children because they say they don't have enough trainers. This is our constraint actually. We don't have people who are willing to be trained, maybe by us, because I'm a parent. All our members are parents. So we know the need and how to advocate our children, especially when they are adult. When they leave the special school, they go nowhere. They stay at home. They might get stressed, and this is kemurungan will happen to them in the end of the day when they reach the age of 30 to 40. So this is where we want to do awareness. Kita nak roadshow to all the state, and our other PSD negeri, Persatuan Sindrom Down negeri, also we want to do the roadshow. So the grant is very important because we want to continuously do, and we want to tell the parents not to just do program, not to just do fundraising. We want to holistically tell the parents what are the needs of your child, and you have to understand, and you cannot keep your child at home. You cannot be denial person. So I hope that with our condition and with our needs and niat yang baik, we can get some help from maybe from the 3 organization here. And also satu lagi question about a student who is in the last semesters. They always visit our centers, but I think their intention is to get the credit hours and also to get graduated with whatever community service they do under the supervision of their lecturers. So we can see the dishonesty of them, you know. They just want us to write, give them the certificate, and then tell them about the children. I don't think so they understand what we are talking about and what we want them to do actually. So some of them just come, they macam apa ya, kita kata dia macam sinis, very sinis with our children, with the condition. You know, Down syndrome has a lot of condition, medical condition, a lot of things, and some of them are multiple. They are also autistic, they are also cerebral palsy. So on education part, I think Ms. Prema can also advise other universities, especially the local universities, that the intention of being community to the centers, whichever disability center, they must have a heart that they want to share, and maybe they are in that condition, or maybe if they are doctors, they might come across this type of patient. So the learning at the centers is very important. So these are the 2 things. Actually, it's just an information.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Puan.
Okay.
So many good points, I think. Tapi, yeah, thank you so much. Give one a round of applause. I think that was not easy, okay? Not easy to do that. And I think thank you for raising awareness among us also. I want the panelists to respond. Tapi I want to collect questions just to save time. Anyone else? Zarif, yes. Come.
Hello, good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First things first, I just wanted to say I'm pretty surprised of what I'm seeing today. I just got to know about the program a couple of days ago, and I think this is something that perhaps is needed in more scales, right, and more capacities. I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit, right? I've been practicing and consulting on NGO development, community development, ESG, for the last maybe 15, 20 years. And in many ways, a lot of the conversations that I've been hearing today, in fact, have been kind of like a recycled conversation for the last 15 years in actuality, right? I mean, we're talking about overlapping or trying to get more support or trying to get more collaborations, right? Essentially, I think one of the things I thought I'd share a little bit, right, is I thought I wanted to share a bit of experience I had. A couple of months ago, I was in Indonesia for a month. I spent 28 days in a place called Kediri, right? Really amazing place in East Java. One of the things I realized when I was there is that I saw something that I think over here pun ada, cuma I think the level of what I saw was probably something a bit more pure and something a bit more comprehensive, which was that whole spirit of gotong royong, first things first. And secondly, connected to that also is the empowerment in a sense of a decentralized sense of empowerment, right? I mean, in Malaysia, I think a lot of things happen in KL or Klang Valley, right? And not too many things happen outside Klang Valley. So when I was in Indonesia, okay, just a little bit of that, I encountered a community of people, right? And they were a vast community, from environmental to disabilities to arts, right? And they were doing all sorts of community engagements on a daily basis, as well as coming together quite frequently. And one of the cool things that I thought when I was there was that the consideration was not at all regarding funding. It wasn't about who could get funding or can I get funding to organize something? Can I get the money essentially to put things together? Because what I really saw was the communities coming together, different sectors, whether or not school teachers, whether or not professionals, whether or not store owners, whether or not toko-toko, right, all the different shops. They just kind of came together and they understood that there were these ongoing programs. As I said, it was like a multiple of them. It was like from environmental, as I said, from disabilities, from childcare. And I was quite amazed and astounded, actually, because things were just buzzing and happening there on a weekly basis. I was there for a significant amount of time. And in that 28 days, initially it was just a holiday, but then it became like a working tour. It was like every few days, they were inviting me to these events and activities. So I thought that was something quite inspirational to share, in a sense, because like right now, I'm imagining it costs a lot to put this all together, obviously, right? I mean, you've got all the logistics and whatever not, and I'm sure I'm sure it's worthwhile as well, for sure. But what I did see there was a lot of things that was happening today was happening there on a weekly basis, right? And was also more happening in a decentralized manner, meaning that the communities themselves, like for instance, if it's happening in like Marang or like happening in like Kota Baru and happening quite regularly, that was kind of like what I saw there as well. And apparently it wasn't just happening in Kediri, it was also happening in places like Tulung Agong and all these other different places in Indonesia. So I thought that's something that perhaps, I don't know whether it's a comment that you can give or whatnot, but I don't see that happening here in essence. Right? I spent a significant amount of time as well in Terengganu, in Marang. I think last year and throughout the last couple of years, I was spending anywhere between like 3 months to 6 months at one go in Terengganu, for instance. And I saw nothing, nada of any community projects. I mean, a little bit, some here and there, right? But not, of course, in the activity scale of what you'd see in the Klang Valley as well. So I thought that's something that perhaps, how can we inculcate that more here in Malaysia, I suppose, right? How can we essentially bring, like the kaka in front here just now, I'm sure you've gone through a lot of struggles as well, and I wonder whether your local community comes together and helps you or not, to activate or right? And so like, where's your center? Or where do you operate? All over. Okay, and do you get a lot of participation from local communities? Do they? That's the thing, right? Yes, exactly. And as I said, and I'm not just pigeonholing one kind of like segment or field, right? I mean, this can be kind of like, as I said, regarding disabilities or environmental or arts or whatever it is, right? So that's something that I thought would be quite interesting to explore, right? To decentralize, essentially, the initiatives as well as the empowerment to essentially allocate resources. So I think like today, the whole spirit of coalition, for instance, I think that's a brilliant kind of thing. And a coalition doesn't have to be a big nationwide coalition, because what often happens with big nationwide coalitions is they end up fizzling out based on who's in the political party or who's working at that time, right? So it'd be interesting to see if we can create more collaborative efforts in a decentralized manner, essentially. Thank you.
Thanks, Arif.
Cool. So anyway, not going to go on too long anymore. So just wanted to say good job, Zaim, as well. Always love the stuff that you do.
Thank you, thank you.
And I hope more things come as well in this sphere. It's been a very quiet last couple of years, and I just want to wish everyone here a great time.
Thank you, Zarif.
Kudos, yes, kudos to everyone.
Zarif Afandi,
The
guys.
organizers especially.
Please buy his book. I've read it. Super good. One more from the audience. It's two more. Maybe we can do the last two, then we wrap up. Sounds like a plan. I think Wahul looks a bit tired.
Oh,
I
sorry.
got two hands there.
Yeah, taking some time, sorry. So I'm coming from Senecas Home. It's it's an NGO for the blind and visually impaired in Penang. So actually today the talk is very good, but we do have some challenge. It's like, when we train up our student, or we call trainee, because we have serving the age between 0 to until 100 years old, especially they are blind and visually impaired. So during the pandemic, we do, still doing the fundraising event online, and also we also joined the NGO Hub, so that to all these platforms, we do a lot of fundraising. But somehow, we still have to build the awareness to the public to understand why we need so many manpower in our NGO, because all my beloved colleagues, teachers, trainer, and it's a challenge for them that it can't be like a normal teachers, one teaching to the whole classes like 20 plus cannot, because they are dealing with the special children. They are mostly need 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, because they need to be a physical teaching hand by hand. So there's a lot of people don't understand that thinking why that we during the COVID pandemic we don't retrain our staff and just to cut your costs. We received this kind of feedback that that some of the corporate telling us, why you don't restrain, cut off your manpower to save your costs. All this my beloved colleague was is actually the asset of the company. They are really have the kind and passionate to teach all these special children, and then we do need their all during the pandemic, even though they are still working with us. So there are people don't understand that how important all this manpower, the trainer to be in the NGO, and somehow that is very difficult to us to recruit a new people we call like fresh grad candidate from university to coming to be working in NGO, because first thing they will think low salary. They don't think about the job, they will think about the salary. So the fresh grad, even though I interview sometimes, they will think like, why I cannot get 3K? My lecturer told me that I'm getting my diploma or degree, I can get 3K salary. Or your NGO provide me so low salary. So sorry, I reject your offer. And then for our blind and visually impaired, after they're learning from our vocational training, we do teach them IT, we do teach them pastry, we do teach them, basketry, and also skill development, and also we have massage. So the now popular thing is our masseuse, they definitely can get a job. But those that are learning IT, right, even though, Penang, there's so many factory line, we do deal with the corporate, asking an opportunity, can you try on? And even we join the Perkeso return to work, we ask the Perkeso, during the job camp, right, for the OKU. When we actually went to the Perkeso job return to work camp, right, they stick on all the OKU, the things, right. None of them want to hire blind and visually impaired. They only put deaf mute, physical, and then for my trainee, they all walk there, right? They feel like, Miss, why they didn't put our category? Are we left behind? Then I tell them, don't worry, maybe you try and talk to them and see, is there any chance for you to get a job? They went out one round, in the end, oh, you're blind. Oh, so sorry. So even though, Penang has a lot of people that, Starbucks hire deaf mute, some company also they hire deaf mute, but visually impaired, blind and visually impaired, they can't get a factory job. They say, sorry, you cannot see. Even though they can make a very delicious cookies, there's none of the bakery shop want to hire them. So they have to make themselves entrepreneur and selling online at home, to promote their own pastry. Because there's no confidence, they feel like blind cannot do anything. So that's why I'm really thank you, to joining the Kind Malaysia and letting more people to know actually what blind and visually impaired can do, and they can get to work. They need a job to sustain themselves. They actually don't want any government to give them money just like that. They actually need a job to raise up and also to have like same family, have their own wife, children. They can get a job and then they can raise by themselves. They no need to begging for people to give them money. So, but it's a good awareness that let people to know that, try to give an opportunity for the blind people a job. They learn IT, they can reply email, they can, doing PowerPoint. In our Seneca Song, the final year project after the semester, they have to present using PowerPoint. They can present, they can do effect. And some more, they can do a simple website because we teach them HTML. But the people is not confident, they don't know. And we try to explain, sometimes they say, are you bluffing us? No, we are not bluffing. They are really learning all this skill and we provide them all this training. So this is something I want to bring out. It's a challenge for us to recruit the people and also to get the blind and visually impaired a job.
Sure.
Thank
you so much for sharing. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you also for all the people who shared. The work that you do is very important. One last, the handsome brother here. Okay.
Hi, good morning to all the panelists. My name is Kavindran. I'm from Malaysian AIDS Council. My question is not going to be very long. It's not going to be very elaborate. It's going to be very direct. Okay, I just want to ask the question because a little bit about what I do. I'm the advocacy and community development for Malaysian AIDS Council. So as we deal with so many programs and we deal with so many issues, I advocate for stigma and discrimination towards people living with HIV. So as many of us may not know, people living with HIV face stigma and discrimination everywhere, workplace, education, access to medication. Sometimes they do need certain aids for themselves, right? So my question is to Madam Anita, as a community development and humanitarian disaster response. I just want to know, how do you overcome the challenges with stakeholders? Because we deal with stakeholders, like the Ministry of Human Resource, Ministry of Higher Education, because we understand that it happens everywhere, even in education sector, that they are denied education because of their status. So I just want to know, how do you overcome the challenges with these different stakeholders? And also my second question would be to Ms. Prema, because we understand that education is everything. It's a start of to develop the conversation, to change the conversation within the general audience. So we do face issue in education sector, especially when it comes to sexual education. We want to change the conversation. We are not promoting um, sexual activities. We are promoting safe sex to curb the spread of HIV and other STDIs. So I want to know from your advice, as someone who has been doing a lot of projects and all that, what is your view? How can we change this conversation? So I think that's all from
Thank you
my
so much,
question.
Kavindra.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kavindra. Thank you so much, guys, for asking questions. Okay, wow, good sharing. I think there was a separate panel session just now. But this is the point of doing this event, is that we want to hear from the people also, not just from us. Maybe what I'll do is I invite all three to respond, and some of you have specific questions. One on issue of, one for, actually, Juanita has a few actually. There was a funding application status, tak adalah. Funding issue. There was one on how do you overcome stigma amongst, I think what the question was, how do you sort of educate your stakeholders when it comes to overcoming stigma? Prema has a question on CIC, comprehensive sex education to avoid, to prevent HIV and STI. Intel is doing anything about that? Very interesting question. Would love to know if there is. Wahoo, I think you can take on broadly the challenges that I think many of them have mentioned. Maybe this could be also, maybe we go through that, and if you have enough time, maybe we can do closing remarks. Looking at time, we have about 50 minutes. So we'll go with Juanita first, and all the way down.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, in terms of, I think, I don't know whether you heard, Puan, from the start when I said that as any funding organization, we cannot do everything. Yeah? It's impossible. There are so many multiple issues. I mean, even here you talk about disability issues, you're talking about HIV/AIDS, you're talking about such wide things. No organization can fund everything. And the reason why we cannot fund everything is if we do a little bit of everything, we don't see impact. That's how it is. Not to say, and I always say that we all started with good heart, you're very good at what you're doing, but we just cannot support everything. So in the case of Hasanah, unfortunately, we don't do health-related or disability issues. We had to make that hard decision because when we looked at our strategy, we realized that we need to be very focused. That's why. Having said that, what has happened is that, that's why I kept saying, keep in touch with foundations because they change their strategies year to year, depending on, it could be different board members driving different things. So like for example, typically we didn't do certain things on health-related things during the pandemic, but we had to because the Ministry of Finance realized that we were a good conduit to do more grassroots work and they gave us allocation. But this year, the allocation has grown smaller, so their priorities change. So the simple answer is we don't do this kind of work, that's why. So unfortunately, that's a very quick answer, but I always tell applicants, keep in touch with us. We were given an endowment by Khazanah to be here for the long term, so we may do it in the future. Thank you for bringing up that excellent point about community engagement. That's exactly what I'm trying to do in community development. So and one of the key areas that we do is looking at community leadership because in Malaysia, we have a very top-down approach in doing things and a lot of our leadership is appointed. And when it's by appointed, as we all know, it doesn't mean that they're good at what they're doing. So we have been investing a lot in terms of bringing up grassroots level community engagement for people to realize that number one, you have the capabilities of solving your own problem. Whether we like it or not, I don't like using this term, but I will. We do have a subsidy mentality here. It's going to take generations to break this. But without being patronizing about it, actually, in my case, when we do part of my community engagement work, we do meet a lot of communities, and through our partners, we realize that if you start with a positive note, is you can do this, and you give them tools, and we give them a lot of training and a lot of confidence, they can do it, and we have found that that's happening. But you're absolutely right, and I always tell my partners, no, we are not meant to be here forever. We need to get out of this, but what do we leave behind? And for our community development projects, we want to leave behind a community that's able to do things themselves and take also personal agency in what you're doing. So for example, if there's a sampah issue, why are you blaming others? That's why I went back to one of my topics. It's down to yourself. What is your responsibility? That's one, yeah? And one of the things that we don't have also is community champions. So during my fellowship, when I went to the US, and I went to 9 cities and I visited more than 15 communities. What I found is that their community champions came from the community itself, whether it's Native American, whether it was African American, whether it was Asian Vietnamese. When I asked them, for you as a community leader, where do you come from? I was born here. I went away to study, I came back. So a lot of our community champions are not coming. We are all outsiders in the community that we work in, largely. Yeah? We need to build up community champions within because they know the issues, they can do it. Just because they're B40, we have come across so many B40 amazing, particularly women, who are actually already leading. So I'll give you one example very quickly. She's my favorite story. Katno. Katno was, she became a widow and she only had a business in her home. And then after that, so we had a program where we built her business, and part of that program was also believing in yourself, do your business. She started having a gerai. And after having the gerai, she realized that she has over orders, and she started then actually giving the business within her community itself. Because part of that program, we also said, you need to give back in your community, but not just give back in terms of charity, but giving business back to your community. And then as she built her business and she realized that, she realized that there's so many problems. All PPR people will always say that there are problems with their belia. She herself set up a community center for belia to do their activities. And that's what we want to see. And we are going to replicate this. One example. Second example, we did, so there's a lot of gender-based violence in a particular district in Sabah. So they started mobilizing, and there are 39 villages in Tambunan, in this place. And we started really, the organization that we worked with started really advocating on gender-based violence and started reaching not just women, because we said you cannot just be talking about gender-based violence with women, but you must talk to children, you must talk to traditional leaders, everybody. And it was done over 3 years. And eventually, the community themselves opened up shelter. They themselves, they realized that they needed to do it. They have opened up shelters. They have set up community leadership amongst themselves. They've started their own enterprise. So it can absolutely happen. But you need to go with the mindset that you believe in the people that you're working with. I keep saying this, stop being patronizing. They have capacity. They're more hardworking than I am. And when you look at that potential and you harness that potential, they can do wonders. And you must capitalize on what is within that community. So I always say that do not think that one community engagement will work, in another it won't. So in Sabah, what we capitalize on is that semangat, what they call semangat kekitaan. They have that. So what is that local language among orang asli, among Sabahans? What is that essential thing that will drive that? And through that, and our partner is very good. And that's why we work with, going back to what you're saying that's happening in Klang Valley, our commitment and why we do, last year we covered almost all states. This year we had to prioritize. We go to the state and we tell them, we want to work with state-based NGOs to work in the state. You know the language, you know the community, you're going to make less mistakes than outsiders coming in. So more and more we are getting, so now like we have not gone to Sabah because we are working with 20 or more Sabahan NGOs who know their Dusun people better, who know their Murut people better, and now we are prioritizing Sarawak. And we are prioritizing Kelantan because we want to work with state-based, and we cannot keep working with KL-based organizations. We need to build their capacity as well, and we're doing that. And we're committed to doing that, yeah? So absolutely what you're talking about. I think in terms of, we all here, I mean, I absolutely empathize and sympathize and understand some of the issues surrounding disability issues there, and relating to what you're saying from Malaysian Art Councils. We are a very prejudicial society. I mean, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about race, lah. Even at the race base, whether you want to say it or not among ourselves, all that. Now, how do we break that? It's not an easy thing, but I think in terms of what I'm not seeing, and something that I tried to do when I was with the UN is going back to the collision. You need to come with a collective voice. When you work as an individual organization, the matter doesn't look serious. When you have a collective and you must have data. It is difficult, but work with agencies that can do the research. Because a lot of the times when we're advocating with emotions. There's only so much you can drive with emotions. Because people's hearts change. How am I supposed to feel emotional about 10 different issues? It's exhausting and it's very upsetting. So I have to create boundaries even for myself. Imagine corporations. But when you work as a collective and you work together, and this is what I said, talking about dropping your egos, work together and have a collective voice, and have evidence as well. Not easy to get, of course, data is horrendous in this country, but there must be a way that you can. Because I worked with a few advocacy groups, right? And sometimes it's also, there's an opportunity sometimes. So you have to do this work over a long term. So like, for example, the women's group, the children's group. The women's group have done fantastic stuff. The children's group, they were often talking about issues on sexual violence against children, years and years and years and all that. But there was an opportunity, I think, during the last government when there was a group of parliamentarians that was quite serious about it. And when they were ready to do it, right? Because they said, like, okay, we need all that information. All these NGOs who had built over years came out with the data almost within a week, provided it to the lawmaker. At that time was Azalina. The law became. It happened. So it can happen, but you need to be ready all the time. You cannot be fighting and saying that nothing happens. You've got to always have, and advocacy is a long-term thing, right? You can't give up. That's why I proudly say I've been doing this for 20 years now, that it's not a fly-by-night thing, especially advocacy. And you need to know the law. You need to know how government agencies work. You cannot just say government is one thing. No, it's broken up by different agencies. Like one of my partners came up and said, Anita, we've been doing a lot of income generation and microloans for women. We are not seeing the changes. We need to look at systemic issues. How do we do this? I said, come, let's have a conversation. Yes, there are ways and means. And this is what we're talking about, framework. One thing that we are not very good at and very hard to get investment is how do you do lobbying and advocacy? And there's a soft approach and there's a hard approach. And sometimes you need multiple approaches. And that goes back to similarly what you're talking about, working in governments on stigmas. We have to walk the talk. So I try to myself break the stigma about mental health. I've gone through mental health issues. I'm now talking, my latest advocacy is on menopause. We don't talk about menopause. And I openly talk about it because, oh my God, I'm having a nightmare. But women don't talk about it. And you know how we suffer being high performance and still going through menopause. So talk about it openly, be brave about it, and bring people to talk about it, because then it becomes normalized. How do you think the West did it? It has to be normalized behavior. But of course, where HIV is concerned, we have to be brave. When I went to Kelantan, sometimes the conversation also, you have to look at the underlying conversation. You create that safe space. So I spoke to one NGO from Kelantan who said, Anita, sebenarnya kat Kelantan ni, highest HIV/AIDS punya data. He said, saya tahu. What can we do about it? But you need to work with different champions who are ready to have that conversation with you, including the government. Like for example, there's one ministry which I had the hardest time penetrating, right? But over the 3-4 years, I cultivated a relationship with one agency. And over the years, she has started bringing in more and more conversations. In 2 weeks' time, she asked me, can 15 of us come and visit you? I said, yes. Can you please bring Jakwa? Jakwa is notoriously difficult. She said, yes, I'll bring Jakwa and let's have a conversation. 3 years cultivating that relationship. There was another lady that came up to me and said, hey, Anita, you're still here? I said, yeah, working on women's issue. 10 years, she still remembers me. So relationship, again, with your donors, government agencies, and at the right time when you can strike, it can happen, not always, but you need to invest in that kind of relationship and understanding where you're coming from. Lastly, beyond emotions, you need to humanize the issue as well. Whether you like it or not, you have to bring that person and let that person also advocate on themselves. We cannot always be speaking. Bring your Down syndrome children. Take them to meetings. Let them speak. And then you'll see some changes happening. I remember when I was working with this one agency, oh my God, it was horrible. He was talking about something about lepaskan orang cacat keluar dari kandang. And I was like, oh my God, how can you say this kind of awful things? But I persisted in changing his mind. He did. So you have to look at your champions, and he was actually the pengarah of one of the UPenn, right? In the end, he changed. He introduced OKU problem issues within his unit. So look at who your champions are. Who do you want to strike? Be very persistent. Be very factual. A bit of emotion, more facts, and work as a collective. And I think miracles can happen. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marita. Very, 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 very wisdom. This is wisdom. Semangat kekitaan, collective voice. Be brave in speaking out on issues including HIV and menopause. I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, and humanize the issues. Key points. Running short of time, but also don't want to sacrifice equality. Maybe I'll pass it to Prema. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your question on the HIV and sexual health education. This has been going on for a long time in Malaysia. Sex education in schools, and also because it is also sort of a taboo subject in Malaysia, in Asia, religious constraints, a lot of things tied to it. But a lot of work has been done to incorporate sex education into the syllabus per se. It's not a real, I mean, a standalone subject, but it has been incorporated to some extent. So we have seen some change. There are also a lot of organizations like the Federation of Reproductive Health, a lot of organizations like you that do a lot on the ground. So it is a very slow process, as I said, but going back to what the speakers have spoken about, and also with the audience, about civic movement. Civic movement is the most effective way to bring change. As Anita said as well, don't talk about government, don't talk about this, but what are we doing? And we have that capability. So one of the things that your organization can do as well, or anybody else, is how many of us actually talk to our children as parents about sex? How many? 3, 4. I am like, okay, some conversations I don't want to get into with my children, right? So parent education, I think, is important. What are parents doing? So everybody can be part of this to bring that change and to highlight issues on sex, on sexual areas, right? For sexual education. So what I've learned is all these years is don't blame anybody, right? Because there's always be somebody you can blame, right? So how am I going to tackle it? As a parent, as an educator, as part of a government, or as part of an NGO, right? So one of the things that you can also do is maybe have trainings for parents to even broach that subject. They have the highest amount of contact with the child, not even the teacher. You know what I mean? So it has to go ground level. I think we need to see it further at lower levels itself. The point of contact, teaching children. And these are things that parents don't want to have conversations about. So if we make it a bit more approachable, we tell parents how they can, have these discussions and even what to talk about. Right? Not just, you see a boy turn that way. No, because they are going to want to experiment. They're going to want to try. They're going to be tempted. So how do we sort of control those situations and give them tips, really? Because honestly, I think the parents themselves are clueless. So it can be done at different levels. And of course, breaking the taboos and all of that is going to be there for some time. So I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you so much.
And come see us as well if you would like to do, something on sexual literacy. We have access to primary schools, secondary schools. There was a condom machine on campus. I don't know if it's still there. So these are little things that we can do.
Yeah.
Zaim smiling
No,
already.
I think what you say is important. Like, be brave. Why do we have to be ashamed when we talk about sex? We are adults. Kita bukan budak kecil, right? And I think that's a problem. I think Malaysians, we like to hypersexualize issues, right? Benda ni tak macam we're not 5. But I think the reaction among public usually is like, oh, tak apalah. Tak boleh. Because we have the highest unwanted pregnancies per capita in the world. Itu bukan isu tak apa, itu isu gila, right? And I think that's, to your point, I think this is something that we need to talk about and take seriously, because we like to sweep it under the carpet and think it doesn't exist. It does. And we are actually paying for it in taxpayers' bills as well. Good point. I'm going to jump to Wahu, looking at the last. You have the last word because we're running out of time. So Wahu, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll use this opportunity to maybe offer a way forward, right? Because, there have been so much sharing of challenges faced by different organizations, right? Funding, how to get advocacy to work for a specific issue, how to get partners to recognize, you need the kind of funding to be able to pay your staff. It's important. Now, with all these challenges, right, one principle I always follow is if you're stuck in a situation or a problem, it's time to learn something new. Right? So that has always been the solution, and I think it's the only solution that's available. If you find yourself being stuck, trying to think of a strategy, cannot get funding, cannot do this, cannot do, cannot achieve your advocacy objective, is to learn something new, right? So you have to use whatever you can. Now, again, if you look at the event, right, like what it is today, I'm pretty sure you see it as an opportunity to connect, to learn from each other, and sometimes to have a very useful discussion about some topics. And as much as we love events like this, it happens once a year, and we take this opportunity so that a big group can gather. It would be nice if we can have that more often, right? So what we do in NGO Hub is that we do organize a small gathering. Usually it's a workshop, right? You learn about a particular topic every single month. So if you would like to continue some of this conversation, you've met a lot of people here these past 2 days. You have talked about certain important topics and you're trying to figure out solutions, right? Continue those conversations, come and join us. I would love to explore ways to just continue to have all these conversations. It's important for us to work as a community, right? We need to build this sector as a community, right? Together, right? So that's why the connection that we have to build takes time, and we have to meet often. I mean, we have to find opportunities. So, please take this opportunity. Come to our training, because for me, that training, right? Even though it's a workshop, but actually the most valuable part that we realize, because during the lockdown, we have to do it virtual. We have to do our training virtual. So workshops are all virtual, right? One part was cut out, which is the interaction and the networking. You can never do it. Virtually, it's like, you come to the workshop and then it's done and then bye-bye and then you switch off. But during events, what happens is, before the workshop starts, you come and then you chat and then you make new connections and then you might have new ideas. So you might ask questions to your fellow NGO workers and people in the sector, right? You might get new ideas, you might get new collaborations. Same thing, after the workshop, same thing happened. People just talk to each other. And I feel like we just need more opportunities like this. So being very thankful about a huge event like this, there's so many connections we can make. We need to continue doing this. So that's, for me, as a suggestion of a way forward.
So Wahoo is saying that connect, collaborate and contribute, 3 C's. Connect, collaborate and contribute. And I think that's a good way to end the session, because look at the time, 11:30, we're at 11:36. Actually, I have to go to the toilet as well. I have to go to the toilet, sorry. Dah 2 jam duduk sini, lama sangat. And with that, I think I want to give all the panelists, thank you so much for your time, and also thank you for contributing. Thank you guys for being here also, 2 hours. And with that, halas, we're done. Awesome, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you to the panelists and also the moderator. Before you leave, we have a token of appreciation to present to you on behalf of Kind Malaysia. I'd like to have Dr. M. Gandhi, the Bumiyati founder, and also the co-founder of Kind Malaysia to present the token of appreciation. Now, everybody else, please don't leave. We're having a quick video of you with the panelists later on, okay? Put on your best smiles and also touch up on your makeup if you need to. Okay, let's have a group photo with all of the speakers and the moderator together with Dato'.